What if the reason why the world is so confusing right now, so crazy, so chaotic, so unpredictable, impossible to explain, what if it's actually not the world that's gone crazy? What if the problem is your map for understanding the world? Or better, what if the world is truly turbulent, but you don't know how to navigate it? I mean, think about it for a moment, right? When explorers sailed off the edges of their known charts, they didn't conclude that the ocean had malfunctioned, right? They concluded that their maps were wrong. The world really was bigger than what they drew. It was always more complex than what they could render on parchment. And the moment they clung to those old charts rather than updating them, the moment that they insisted that the map was real and the ocean was lying, that's when ships started sinking. I would argue that for many of us, we're in that moment right now. Every week, expert after expert takes to the airwaves or the opinion pages and tries to explain what's happening on the world stage using categories that just simply don't apply anymore. Left versus right, democracy versus authoritarianism, developing world versus developed world, the West versus everyone else. And every week, those explanations fall more and more flat. They don't satisfy. They don't predict. They don't actually illuminate anything about the world in terms of the way it's really working. The Iran war, the shifting allegiances in the Middle East, the rise of populist leaders across Europe, South Asia, and Latin America who defy every conventional practical label. The massive religious renewal that's happening all over the world. The rise of Islamo-socialism, for example, in our nation's largest cities. The strange coalitions forming across what used to be called the global south, right? The breakdown of institutions that were supposed to be permanent, institutions that every political science textbook told us would endure. None of it makes sense on the old map. And that's the point. The failure of description is the real story of our moment, not the events themselves, though the events are certainly extraordinary. The deeper story is that our intellectual frameworks are collapsing faster than the institutions that were built to explain. We're living through what I call a crisis of cartography. The map makers are still drawing the same continents, the same map, but the tectonic plates have shifted, and they've shifted dramatically. So what are those old maps exactly? Well, there's basically three. We got three major maps that have dominated Western thinking for the past 70 years. The first is what's known as the liberal international order. And this is the one that tells you that the story always ends with the triumph of liberal democracy. Free markets, multilateral institutions, spreading everywhere and anywhere until the whole world becomes essentially just a huge, large version of the EU. It's a clean map, it's a hopeful map, but it's a map that's been crumbling since at least 2008. And most of the people who drew it still refuse to acknowledge what's happening. The second is the nation-state map. And that's one that assumes that the fundamental unit of world politics is the sovereign nation, with its borders, its flag, its seat at the UN, its army. But while nations obviously still exist, they no longer hold primary loyalty the way they once did. Something older and deeper has reemerged, something that predates the nation-state entirely. Civilizations, religion, sacred communities, peoples defined not by passports, but by shared belief, shared ancestry, and shared destiny.